welcome to Long Lost Friends. I'm Elizabeth Eve King.
And I'm Andrea Goyan. Elizabeth and I used to do improv comedy together back when we were 19.
But we lost touch.
And then a couple of years ago, we found each other again and discovered
I'd become a painter, a writer, a performer, a Pilates teacher, an animal lover, and a biologist.
Hey, I'm a painter, performer, writer, Pilates teacher, animal lover, and well, okay, I'm not a biologist, but we're long lost
friends.
And we're both speculative fiction writers.
My work has appeared in MetaStellar.
MetaStellar, for those of you who don't know, is an online magazine that specializes in publishing original science fiction, horror, and fantasy. There's a link below. Today, we are so excited to have joining us Charlton Pettus. Charlton is a musician. He has been a producer and guitar player and songwriter for Tears for Fears since the year 2000. And he is also a writer, and he wrote this thriller novel, Exit Strategy. And he is currently also working on a children's television show, Kindergarten, the musical, which is in development at Disney. So we're really excited. We have a lot to talk about. And welcome, Charlton.
Welcome. We're so glad. I'm a big Tears for Fears fan. But first, before we talk about anything, show us your pets.
Bill, come here. Come here.
Camera shot.
This is Bill.
What's her name?
Billy.
Billy.
This is Billy, like Billie Holiday or Billie Eilish.
Oh, how old is Billy?
4.
Do you
I
have
know what you're thinking. She is the most beautiful animal you've ever seen, and it's true.
I'm
But she's a little spoiled, a little needy.
Aren't they all? I mean, aren't we all? So, well, you know, I was hoping today, one of the things to cover and talk about with you, because I've actually seen you work on this a little, is how you are working to take Exit Strategy and make it into a series.
Right. So what happened was, actually all sorts of things happened. The salient bits were a friend of mine who's a director read the book because, you know, he had a long flight or something. It's the standard kind of airplane-y thing to read. He read it, loved it. He was like, you know, you should make a series, because that whole world of, you know, the seamy underbelly of witness relocation does play into these kind of archetype male fantasies of disappearing and reinvention and blah, blah, blah. So sounded easy enough. So I started writing a pilot thinking, all right, that's a week. It's short after a novel. A year and some later, we have a pilot script and a pitch, and it's just kind of beginning to go out into the world. So, you know, it's a nightmare. Don't do it.
Thanks, Charlton. What I wanted to talk about, though, because I'm currently working on taking a short story and developing it into a series as well. And one of the things that is so interesting to me is how you really have to let go of so much in order to develop a series from a story. At least that's been my experience. And you've really, you have a whole different world. I mean, you have the same world, but a whole different group of characters and things.
Yeah, everything changes, as they say. I mean, you know, the main character who was a guy is a girl. You know, everything changes.
So how does that work with your saying the archetype male fantasy if suddenly your main character is a woman now?
Well, it's complicated. So the main character in the novel is the guy to whom things happen, who does things. The main character in the series, because it's a series and the story of that guy from the novel ends after one season, so the main character in the series is the bad guys, right? So Sam in the novel is the slightly mysterious, slightly malevolent head of the bad guy agency. Sam in the series is going to recur season after season, so she has become, in addition to a woman, she is kind of a driving engine for the show. So, you know, like I said, it's all very, very different.
Is she still head of the bad guy agency?
She is head of the bad guy agency, but the bad guy agency, I'm trying to think of a good analog. I mean, it's a little bit like Scandal from a neutral perspective. They're the bad guys, right? Like they're the political manipulators of opinion and all that. But in the context of the show, they're not really the bad guys. And in the context of our show, the exit strategy company, for the most part, does what could be seen as good things, even though they can be scary.
Without, giving away everything, can
Give
you
away everything. Give away everything.
ignore the woman, the other woman? Can you tell us a little bit about exit strategy itself and what the agency does? Without,
sure. Okay? Yeah, I mean, I think the inspiration for it was the kind of privatization of government function that obviously happens everywhere, and the kind of, post-mercenary reality we live in. So the idea is witness relocation, which we've had for a long time, isn't really supposed to help people who are technically not friends of the United States, right? So the idea is the government would want to use those services anyway, so you privatize it. You basically make a mercenary witness relocation agency, and it's, kind of in that shadow government-y, QAnon-y world. But yeah, I mean, I think it's probably kind of true. I'm sure there are, branches of McKinsey or one of those other ethically challenged companies where they do those kinds of services for foreign governments that are not friendly to the United States. So that's the premise. And then once these people exist, they work with all different kinds of people, including dictators who have absconded with their country's money and need to find a place to spend it without getting killed, or just rich Wall Street types who have behaved very poorly, or the classic guy who just has to get away. So in the novel and the first season, it's a guy who has flirted with suicide, decided he doesn't really have the guts to do it, but really has to get out of his life. And so he hires exit strategy and comes to regret it. But you can't go back. And that's the gist of the novel. Giving away nothing.
I've read it. I've read it a couple of times, I think, over time. And it's great. And it's a thriller. And I mean, you'd consider it a thriller, right? Or
I consider it a love story disguised as a thriller. Yeah. I mean, it's really, that's sort of the hope of where it lands, right? It's really about just the love story between these two people who find each other against overwhelming odds, but all framed as a thriller with chases and foreign locations and guns and code and stuff.
That gives me, just brought up something that I've always wanted to ask you about a little bit, is you have had the great luck in your life, I think, of traveling a good deal. And I think you use it so well in your writing. Like, I feel like I'm right there. So do you find that has helped you a ton?
Totally. I mean, I think most of us are unbelievably lazy, right? So we end up writing incessantly about ourselves and things we know and have done because it's easier, and because when you write about things you don't really understand at all, you aren't very convincing. So yeah, I've been lucky to live a bunch of strange places. So yeah, I mean, it definitely makes that part much easier. You just remember.
Are any of your characters musicians?
They are not. And yeah, it's funny. I've never been even a little bit tempted to do that. I find musicians so kind of uninteresting. You know, it's that thing, right? You know, you look in the mirror and you say, well, I know me and I know I'm boring. So that's not that interesting. Who's interesting?
So what are most your characters do that are interesting? Oh, relocate.
Scientists. Well, no, they're mostly scientists. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
that's super interesting. I mean, obviously you guys find it interesting as well, right? So, you know, that in our lifetime, to me, most of the most interesting stuff is that it's,
Yeah,
you know,
it's science,
it's
basically.
medicine, astronomy, physics, like all that stuff is crazy. Like we're extraordinarily lucky in that one respect.
Yeah. And knowledge of the mic, you know, and you can even look at like what's that they do Journey into the Microscope. It's not, but it's on the sci-fi, it's on the not sci-fi science channel, and they have, you can see these little creatures that you would never be able to see even with a really good microscope. I mean, you can just watch these amazing things that are happening all around you all the time and you can't see, which is kind of, then you're.
No, it's amazing. I mean, it's the big things, little things thing. I mean, you know, the what we're learning about the universe is unbelievable right now. And what we're learning about the microverse is unbelievable. And then, you know, you get into the quantum thing and that's all crazy, quantum computing. I mean, you know, it's all super fun.
Yeah.
I want to diverge for a second, Charlton, and ask you, and this is something you may or may not want to go into, and it's cool if you don't want to. You, at one point, were working on something that took you into some interesting and weird computer experience. I don't know if that's something you would want to talk about or not.
I'm not sure where we are.
About the dark web.
Oh, I mean,
how do you get onto the dark web?
No problem talking about it. An onion browser, you know, a Tor browser. You know, the dark web, I think people, when they write about it, they make it sound very mysterious. It's not that mysterious. It's just you're basically going where DNS servers don't, right? So you can't Google a location and find it. You have to kind of know where you're going. But that just means there's bunches of pages out there that have lists of all the places you might want to go, right? So you find one of those landing pages and there's links to all kinds of stuff. By the time you get there, half of the links are dead and don't go anywhere anymore. But, you know, the dark web's not a weird, scary, mysterious place. It's just a place where no one has an address, you know, nothing. There's no phone book. So you're literally, it's like being dropped in a strange neighborhood. And if you want to figure out where things are, you got to go knock on doors a little bit.
A good story.
Yeah, but it's, you know, it's pretty unregulated. So, you know, you get a lot of distasteful content. You know, if you ask yourself, who wants to live in a neighborhood where no one has their address listed, you know, you figure out who you're going to be running into. It's a lot of, you know, drugs, the worst kind of porn, because the regular internet's got plenty of regular porn, but the, you know, it's just bad things that people don't want to be able to have themselves tied to. So, you know, you go out there with an onion browser and you poke away.
What's an onion browser? Sorry.
So how do I just explain this, since I don't know that much about it? The gist of it is addresses on the dark web don't use the normal domains that we're used to, .co.uk, .com. It doesn't use any of that. They use these other domain names, and the assumption is you're on a browser. An onion browser or a Tor browser uses relay networks. So your IP address is totally hidden, right? Because you know how a VPN works, where you use some other server somewhere and that's all that outside people see. So on an onion browser, you go through like 4 of those. And so you get bounced to, you know, Luxembourg, Berlin, China, Hungary, and that at some point it stops, and that's the IP address that sites
Shows
see
up.
when you visit them. So you're totally protected in theory. There are always ways they can find you, like you're told not to resize your window because that sends clues about where you are in your machine and stuff. But assuming you kind of do what you're supposed to and you use an Onion browser, you're pretty much able to go anywhere with impunity.
It's interesting. I mean, it really is an interesting, I think there's really interesting stories that can come out of that.
Agreed, but I think it's like all those things we don't know very much about. It's not as interesting as you think it is. You know,
No.
it's a lot of angry, kind of weird people, and
Well, I don't even mean the actual going in, but kind of having listened to you talk about it, I just think there could be some interesting science fiction stories that you could write out of
100%.
that world.
100%. Like, the whole way we think of the internet is not really real. Like it's this construct with the interconnectedness and the addresses and the DNS and Google and all the ways we kind of organize our idea of the internet. I mean, it's sort of like the dark matter thing, which is why the dark web thing I think is accurate. Like there's this whole other layer to it that we don't see just because it's not linked via the normal methods, So you start poking around, there's all kinds of stuff out there.
Because I'm never going to do that, but
Oh, come on.
I want to go back now for a moment back to exit strategy. I'm wondering how you ended up deciding that Sam would be a woman. Was it just to add more female characters into the story, or was there another reason that you guys, or you and your, I don't know if you're working with someone on it or you?
No, I think it happens. I think this is sort of a thing that happens more in TV than in fiction, and I think in part it's because you see these kind of cliches over and over and over and over again. Like every character kind of gets reduced to this kind of tropey thing where it's like, oh yeah, I've seen that guy. That's that guy. And so I think there's a point in the process when you have these characters and actors are going to play them, and it's not this kind of vague thing like in a novel where you can be pretty nuanced. Like it ends up being a little flatter, and so you think, well, what's the last kind of characteristic you would expect this character to have? Like if you have a Jason Bourne super powered spy guy, making him Matt Damon, you've been there, done that, right? It's every Tom Cruise movie, it's all those movies. So enter Hannah. I don't know if you've seen Hannah. I thought Hannah was pretty effective. It's a teenage girl. Great. I mean, the more kind of off trope you can get, the more interesting the character becomes. So, as we were kind of going through the thing, and we had these characters that were definitely familiar, kind of iconic characters, we definitely thought about ways to change them and just make them less expected. And a character like Sam, who has so much kind of menace and implied power, which is, a characteristically male idea, this kind of projected power without having to physically use it, right? It's just this projection of power idea. Having that be a woman just seemed more interesting, more compelling.
Yeah, I think it's great. I remember him so well from the novel, and I'm trying to translate it in my head a little bit, but I love the idea. I think it'll be really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, what I always liked about Sam was that he used power without ever doing anything. It was always this implied threat, like you knew he had power, and so he never had to raise his voice or threaten, or he could be this gentle kind of country doctor, preacher kind of figure, and yet still you knew there was this implied threat. And so as a woman, to me, she's even more menacing, which is great.
It's really great. Yeah, well, that's exciting. I wish you all the luck going out now with it. It's I know that's the next step, and that's crazy.
So how many episodes basically are you doing before?
Well, we wrote the pilot. It's an 8 to 10 episode, they're the usual kind of 54 to 58-minute kind of thing. And that 8 episode thing encompasses the arc of the novel. And then we have ideas for the second season and the third season, which are completely different customers, right? So it's like think of Fantasy Island, right? Like the plane boss, the plane, and you have the cast of characters, but the main guys on the island are the same, right? So it's basically that. So different customers with different problems, different solutions, and then hopefully there'll be some overlap. Like, we talk about having the timeline slightly entangled. So you realize this is why Sam disappeared back in season 1, because he had to go deal with this thing we're seeing in season 3. It's that kind of stuff.
That's
But
cool.
it's fun.
And I think that's such a great way, because one of the things, remember when 24 was on,
Mhm.
the first season was unbelievable. And then they kind of just rehashed it. I thought it should be I was like, it should be a different 24 hours in someone else's life.
Well,
You know,
I 100% agree, but mostly because Kiefer Sutherland yelling just got old. I couldn't hear it anymore.
I know they were after, it's all about the money. So, did you guys do a deck? Do you have a deck for exit strategy?
Nope.
No?
We have the pilot, and we have kind of a 1-page thing just talking about the idea. And
Did you find you used the same dialogue that you had in the novel at all?
I found that I use the same dialogue all the time because I'm lazy, and I rewrote it all the time because that doesn't work.
Do you imagine the music or have anything to do with the music, since that's such a part of, any kind of film?
100%. I mean, don't we all write with music on, right? You have to, right? Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of times I write with the music that's in the scene in my head playing. And there are times in the book when I actually will say the music that I think is happening in the scene. And one of the nightmares of getting the book out in the first place was trying to clear the lyrics that I quoted in the book. It was the worst process ever.
Really?
Wow, and that's coming from someone in the business.
No, that's why I thought this is no problem. I know the guy who wrote the song. How hard can this be? But he had sold the rights, and it was a nightmare.
Yeah, I know most people and attorneys recommend you don't use anything. Most of us don't use anything in our novels or short stories because of that.
But that's like the YouTube, it's like the whole
YouTube.
YouTube thing with music, right? Like basically the net effect of this is one should never actually use music. You shouldn't put songs in videos you've made. You shouldn't quote lyrics and things you've written, because the music industry's ability to license these things is dysfunctional. Like they just haven't figured out what it is. They don't know. They know they want to make money off it somehow, but when you're making a video about your baby nephew and Rush's publisher wants money, it's like that just doesn't make sense. Anyway, it's a broken system. But
I remember many years ago in my Pilates studio that we had music playing. We bought CDs and we'd pop a CD on for people to listen, and they caught us, and we had basically a cease and desist kind of thing where you're not allowed to play music unless you're going to pay. And I'm like, kind of doesn't make sense to me where I have 1 or 2 people sitting there and I bought the CD, and but
if you read the fine print in your CD booklet, which I'm sure you've done, you will realize this is licensed to you. You don't own it.
Yeah.
It's all bad. But
I didn't know that about the Pilates class thing. I knew about putting lyrics in books. You can put like 2 lines, I think, of something, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, I think that there may not be a legal amount you're allowed to use, but they don't chase you unless you get to some magical number. I don't know what the magical number is.
I know that we have a lawyer in one of my groups who's a trademark lawyer kind of person. She's like Don't use any of it, because if it's recognizable, even if 2 or 3 words make someone go, oh, I know that song, you're basically
You're profiting off the work of,
right, of someone else, which is a shame because so much of our lives are
it's
embodied
ridiculous.
with music, and you want to say, so you can say the title, but you know, you often want to have a character singing or humming to something or hearing it in the background, and you can't. So
It's bad, but we won't get bogged down in how bad it is, because that'll eat the entire thing.
yeah. But let's, I thank you for chatting with us about this. It's really interesting, and especially for me selfishly right now, because I'm embarking on this myself. Really interesting.
Well,
So,
I would like to know more, but it's just like so much more, like how do you, you know, the first scenes and the, you know, all these descriptions you've had and tried to make real in your novel, suddenly that's all going to be there. So how do you, you know, it's just such a shift.
No, I think you throw 90% of it away. Like you just have kind of, you go back to a skinny stack of index cards with things you know you have to get to, and everything else, at least in my limited experience with it, is so different on screen, and even more on paper pretending to be on screen, than it is in a book. Like the way you expect people's imaginations to fill in the blanks totally changes. Like you really have to show a compelling story, whereas in a novel, you know, different people are going to visualize it different ways. They're going to inject themselves into it. Like it in a way is much easier to do it in fiction. Like I have a respect for screenplays and how hard they are.
but the interesting difference, I mean, too, is that, you know, you have some incredible descriptions of, now I'm forgetting, Japan in here.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Right? So, and buildings and things, and you don't have to write the description, you just show it.
Right, but in the screenplay, you can't show it either. You just
say, right, a street in Japan or whatever, and you let them figure that out, but you get to, there's shortcuts in a way too, because anything visual is seen rather than having to describe it all. So, yeah, but the rest of that is
it's so much more fun to describe it, and in a way, so much easier to describe it, because you get to notice the features that are relevant to your story. And when you actually put it on a screenplay, like you're trusting people to do all that stuff.
Yes, it's a control thing, Charlton. You have to let that control go.
Why
right?
do you think we're all writers? You don't think we have issues with control? We sit in rooms by ourselves all day, exercising autocratic control over ourselves.
We kill people. We like have babies be born. You're right. You're right. A God complex for sure.
We have issues.
All right, well, I think we should move to our next part, Elizabeth.
Yes, we should. It's been so fascinating. Yeah. Thank you so much. Well, and I also want to say thank you to Maria and Alex Korolov, who are our producers.
I'm interrupting you because we have to talk about our best thing.
Well, I was thanking them, and then I was going to talk about my best thing.
We normally, okay, that's fine. I'm confused.
Yeah, I was just moving it around first. Yeah. Thank you, because that's they're one of my best things, right? They do our show.
All right, I should let you finish your thank you though, because now I interrupted it.
Okay, thank you, Maria and Alex Korolov,
thank you guys
for editing and producing. We couldn't do it without you. It's like, and all your graphic skills are beyond amazing.
I know.
So we always end with the best thing we learned this week. So I'm going to start because I always start. So I guess the best thing I learned is one of the big problems, of course, is ocean plastics, not just big ocean plastics, but microplastics. How can we possibly deal with these little things we can't see that are everywhere and in everything? And one of the new things they're thinking about is if you look at a manta ray, you know, they have these big mouths and they do the filter feeding thing. And they have these little sort of weirdly shaped gills, and the gills cause the plankton that they eat to sort of bounce away from their gills, so the water can just pour straight through and they can retain all the gills and eat the krill rather and stuff and eat them. So they're thinking to use these kind of things that would cause the microplastics to bounce away from the filters and capture the microplastics, and the water would go through and it wouldn't get all clogged up, which is a lot of problems with filters. And then if they can do this, like on places that are going out to the ocean, maybe they can catch the microplastics before they actually go into the ocean.
Wow, that would be cool. As usual, have to read. Elizabeth retains all this stuff. So I was reading that in Arizona's Wupaki Park, they had this huge torrential rain, like a monsoon rain, 4 inches or something back in July, and hundreds of triops hatched. So they're like little mini horseshoe crabs. That's what they look like, but they call them more like a shrimp. They have 3 eyes. 2 are compound and 2 compound eyes with a photoreceptor between them. They're about 1.5 inches long. And here's what's really cool. They can lie dormant in the desert for decades. And then a rain like that, a torrential rain, causes them to hatch. They gather together in little pools of water. And within 90 days, they go through their life cycle, have new baby eggs where they wait for the next few decades. It's just phenomenal.
That's amazing.
I like that one. Isn't there some other fish, like a lungfish or something, that lives in the mud in the desert, and when the same kind of story?
Yeah, and there's a frog in Africa like that too. The tadpoles can just lie there and suddenly they're frogs, which is probably why all those people in the Bible were like, oh my God, a plague of frogs.
Right.
Could be.
It's like, no, you're just ignorant.
Wait, so you're saying people, never mind.
So Charlton, do you have anything that was really cool?
Well, mine ties into yours, actually. I had been under the impression that it was just America and Europe where the birth rate had gone off a cliff, and our existential despair and angst was putting us below 2.1 and all the stuff that goes with that. Turns out this week that it's everyone. They published the numbers from literally everywhere, South America, Asia, everywhere. Pretty much everyone is at or below 2.1, which means in your hibernating in the mud story of the triops, we're for some reason, which I still think is unclear, we are retracting. We're retreating into the mud to wait for the rains to come.
Don't you think that, we're just so overpopulated, it's about time?
The overpopulation story, right? Like, if you took all the people in the world and they lived in the population density of Manhattan, how much world would we need?
But isn't it about resources?
Yeah.
No, I don't think there's any resource we're short of. The answer is Texas, by the way. We would all fit in Texas. Well, no, there's not a shortage of water. There's a shortage.
Oh God, if anything would make Texas worse, it's having all of humanity.
But
I thought Texas was already as bad as it got, but
all
now
of the people in the world in Texas.
Oh.
And then all the rest would be free to do whatever we want with.
I just sort of feel like that's sort of like if you think about the universe, does it end? Is there a wall? That's how that Texas thing is in my brain. I can't figure, is it 7 billion people right now?
It's
about
just in India.
7
Is
billion
it even
plus.
going down in India, the birth rate? Did they say?
Yeah.
India. Well, it's certainly not in Utah.
India's one of the highest, though. You're right. India's one of the highest. It's probably at maintenance still. So 2.1, 2.2, right around there.
Wow.
Because I'm surprised that
I love this idea of Texas. Like that's the short story title. I mean, that's your department, right? Like everyone in the world lives in Texas.
And you're saying, would they have to be standing like this side to side?
It'd be Manhattan. It'd be as crowded as Manhattan.
you can't let everybody out on the street at the same time is the thing. I mean, have you ever, if you lived in New York at all, it's
15 years. 15
yeah.
years.
I lived 1 year and I thought, I was like, I understand why rats stop breeding after a while and people don't seem that smart.
I love New York. I thought it was a perfectly lovely population density.
There you go.
Well, this has been great fun. Thank you, Charlton.
Yes, thank you so much.
Totally fun.
And I just also want to say for all of our viewers, please like the video, leave comments for us. We'd love to hear from you. And be sure to subscribe to our channel. So if you hit the notification button, you won't miss any episodes. And if you'd like to support us, you can go onto our Patreon site. And all the links are below in the box. And all donations go to paying for original speculative fiction. The magazine's all run by volunteers, so all the money goes to our authors. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
The Zoom wave. Bye.
Bye, Zoom wave.